not recording anything. All right.
Oh.
You guys just froze, so I don't know what's going on.
Oh, no, you're good.
Am I still in?
You're in.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Yeah. I can hear you, but I just can't see it.
All right.
Video's frozen.
You're listening to the Janchi Show, hosted by 3 Korean American adoptees diving headfirst into what it means to be adopted, Korean, American, and more. And now, here's your hosts, Nathan, Patrick, and KJ.
Oh, okay. Welcome back to the Janchi Show. This is your host, Nathan Nowak, along with KJ and Patrick. I am going to say that sounded very similar to the way you guys roll into these episodes. I just realized. I think I'm taking some of your intros and absorbing that.
I was just thinking, you really marinate Janchi Show.
Oh, I do?
Yeah, you were like, welcome back to the Janchi Show. And any Koreans that I hear who they that's just part of their language, it's like Janchi. And it's very clipped.
It's
and
so short.
Welcome
Janchi.
back to the Janchi Show.
Oh, you sound good.
Well,
This is
I
Nathan
take
After
my time.
Dark.
Yes, exactly. It's more of a radio show,
It's
but we are the
11
Janchi
PM
Show.
on
Would you like to
Sirius
explain what
59.
Janchi is in your dulcet tones?
Janchi means to feast or to celebrate in Korean, and we use that to celebrate who we are as Koreans, as adoptees, as Americans, and really as people. Is that good?
This is KJ
That's
Roki
great.
This is-
for NPR.
This has been. I'm
That
Ira Glass.
was
That's a
great.
bad Ira Glass. Sorry, I'm Guy Raz, and you're listening to How I Built This.
There you go.
Okay,
That was
Okay.
good.
My voice
Yeah.
leans naturally more towards Guy Raz than Ira Glass, I think.
You should
Which is
do
unfortunate because I can't stand Guy Raz as a host.
you should record the voiceovers for training modules.
Training modules.
Yeah.
I thought about doing voice acting. I don't know. It seems like a fun thing that I could do. I definitely have a face for it.
Okay. Who are you, my dad? Get that joke out of here.
Yes.
Yeah, I liked it.
Surprise.
That's good.
Oh my god.
Getting ready for the dad jokes.
Surprise. Hilarious.
Well, I appreciate them. So, yeah, how you guys doing? We had our Lunar New Year's, so we're not going to talk about that because we feel like we've talked about it for the last 4
We're
episodes.
talked
done
about New
talking
Year
about
for,
the new year.
5
It's
straight
now the
episodes, I
old
think.
year.
Yep, we're not talking no more New Year's.
No more, he says.
It's already
No more.
well into the years. We are now moving on to February, which is crazy. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but that felt really quick already. That a 12th of the year has gone by.
112.
I don't know how to deal with the intersectionality of Lunar New Year happening and Black History Month. I was like, oh yeah, and then I was like, there was too many things, I'm trying to be aware of too many things. So that's been a struggle. Also, I'm just I don't know. I feel like I was getting better at being a person of color, and now I'm I don't know how to do this anymore. So just drop a yes in our Instagram feed if you also feel like that with no further context. Just yes. That's all.
Yes,
Okay.
yes
We'll
or no.
know. We'll
I saw a
know.
lot of people watching Rush Hour.
Okay.
What?
I don't know if that counts. Maybe, I guess. I will
you
say I
know.
really enjoyed those movies as growing
I
up.
know. Honestly, yeah, they were some.
Lee, how am I supposed to know what you were saying? That's me.
Good
You go this way, I
classics.
go that way. You go this way, I go that way. Yeah.
That's pretty good. Dual
That's the-
impression.
See, there we go. We're back to KJ's. This is just going to be his demo reel right now. So
I do need
Okay.
it real if I'm going to be a voice actor.
that is
That's
true.
true.
I only have photos, which would
As
get
you
me
just-
the job.
As
Yeah,
you just
obviously.
mentioned. Yeah, exactly.
That's what the listener now knows, that we're seeding these
Okay,
reels
we gotta
throughout
focus up.
throughout
because
this intro.
This is weird. We're recording on a weird time, so I feel like we're all just off our rhythm. And yeah,
I feel like
anyways,
it's hilariously on rhythm.
We've got
Exactly.
some
This is what
big
people come for.
news, some big news, some big life events, namely coming from Patrick's corner. You've seen it on his Instagram, unless you don't follow him, in which case you haven't seen it on his Instagram, which is why we actually want to bring it to the forefront today. So Patrick, tell us about the Adoptee Citizenship Act, its amendment to the is it Compares Act?
The Competes Act.
Oh, the Competes Act. See, I've read your stuff occasionally. I made it to like slide 2 as I skimmed. Anyway, so yeah, inform me, your mildly interested follower, what I've been liking recently.
Yeah, so in 2000, Congress passed a law called the Child Citizenship Act, which granted certain intercountry adoptees with citizenship, granted that they were under the age of 18 at the time the bill was enacted. Unfortunately, this left out tens of thousands of intercountry adoptees who were over the age of 18 when that bill went into effect. And so those impacted adoptees have had to live with diminished rights in the country, as well as the fear of deportation at any given moment because of their citizenship status. And so the Adoptee Citizenship Act, which just passed in the House on February 4th, would close this loophole by granting retroactive citizenship to the impacted adoptee community, as well as providing pathways to citizenship to adoptees who have been deported under the current law.
That's awesome. And if I remember what I've kind of glanced at, this is the first time that it's gotten this far in the process, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's never been getting out of committees and stuff like that, right?
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like worked its way around in the House to get this far, but it's still a huge step forward.
This is a big first down for all of the football heads out there. It's definitely not a touchdown. It's not the game winner, but we're feeling momentum shift, right?
Right. Yes.
So what's the next step? What's the next thing that we can do?
So the next step is we have to get it through Congress. We have to get it through the Senate. And so the Senate passed a similar bill in June, their version of the Competes Act, which did not include the Adoptee Citizenship Act. So right now they're going to go to committee and reconcile the differences in the bill before sending it to the president. And so what we need to do is make sure not only that they continue to keep the Adoptee Citizenship Act in the reconciled version of the bill, but also that they send a finalized version. They get to the finish line with that overall bill and then send that off to be signed. Because at the end of the day, we're not out of the woods until the president signs this into law and the bill is enacted. So the next step is contacting your senators. There are tons of different ways to do that. Go follow Adoptees for Justice and go to their website. They have a lot of different ways that you can contact and get involved. AdopteeCitizenshipAct.org also has ways that you can reach out to them as well. So that's the next step, is putting pressure on the Senate to get this done.
Fantastic.
And you can read more on the Forbes article
featuring
Patrick Armstrong himself.
Way to go, Patrick in the world.
That was pretty impressive. That was not just the world. That was Forbes.
The world of Forbes.
Wait, isn't that the world? Isn't that the world?
It is. It's the same
Well,
thing.
I appreciate that. I mean,
no, I thought that was great. So keep up the good work.
It's very humbling to have been able to do work like this, and I just appreciate all the support that's happened so far. I will say we have a petition going right now as well. Just another simple way to share your voice and share your support, and wanting to get as many signatures as possible, because that's another tool that we use in meetings with legislators, with their staff, to say, hey, look at how many people support this issue. And
I even wrote something about it back during NAM in November. Yeah, there's a couple links in the 60s. In November. I know, long ago. But
whenever you say NAM, I just back in NAM, like the Vietnam War.
I know it's a different
so
NAM.
Funny.
National Adoptee Awareness Month. But there was a slide that said that actually had some good resources where you could contact your senators and your government and stuff like that. And I did do it at the time. So if you guys are looking for that, go back and find those links, and you can contact your local politicians. Keep that thing rolling forward.
Yeah, for sure. And you can go to the Janchi Show link in our bio, and you can sign the petition that way. Signing a petition literally costs you $0. It is entirely free to do, and it's so easy to throw your support behind this thing. It's insane to me that you could have been adopted across national borders and then not been a citizen just because of these loopholes. And then the fact that they tried to rectify it and they still didn't do it the right way. So it's just really important to me personally, just to see this go through. And so I'm really excited for the progress of that and the moment that we're in, and the momentum and all those things. But speaking of moments and momentums, we have an incredible guest this week we're doing something different because we're doing back-to-back interview shows, but we had to capitalize on the moment. We had to seize the moment.
We do have to seize the day. Carpe diem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Specifically seize the person in a totally friendly and consenting way.
Okay.
That's the best way I could have said that, right?
All right. I mean, I'm going to roll with it. Let's roll with it. I'm going to leave it in.
Amazing. Yeah, we have Michelle Lee on the show, and this interview is just so much fun. And I don't know, I didn't expect it to be as fun as it was. After, and I don't know, I don't even know. It was awesome, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it.
We felt very Asian afterwards.
Nice.
Okay.
You like that?
Nice. Hashtag.
Okay.
Hashtag very Asian.
It was a really incredible interview, and I'm not going to spoil anything here. So without further ado, let's roll that clip.
Get into it.
Welcome back to the Janchi Show. We have an incredible guest joining us today. She's a mom, a wife, a lover of big breed dogs, and an award-winning news anchor. Michelle Lee is here. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
God. Wow. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for your interest. I'm so glad that we can connect.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you have the time to sit down and do a podcast. I mean, you're someone that's incredibly busy right now, not only with just your regular work, but with everything else that's been going on that we'll get to. Definitely want to touch on that. But as we start all of our shows and all of our interviews, wanted to ask you to share as much or as little as you'd like about your adoption story.
Okay. How much time do we have?
We have as much time as
How
you're
much
willing to
time
give
do
us.
As much as you want.
It's your world. We're just living in it.
Yeah.
Okay. Wait, are we just going from the beginning? You guys want to hear my adoption story?
I mean, it's just however you want to tell that story.
This is kind of
Yeah.
open for you to help. That's how we kick it off. Just some people like to share a lot. Some people like to share a little bit, and we build from there. So whatever you feel most comfortable with.
Okay. Well, let's see. I came to Missouri when I was 6 months old, and my parents, Charles and Sharon Sherwood, were very like blue collar. Like my dad was a construction worker. My mom did like whatever jobs she could. And then grew up in rural Missouri, like towards South Kansas City-ish. But when I was a kid, I did like Korean heritage camps and random things like that. I don't know if you guys ever did those. And
no.
one year, oh really? So it's kind of interesting because there was an adoption agency in Tulsa that was not my adoption agency. I was adopted through Holt.
Yeah, I'm adopted through Dylan.
Oh,
I'm adopted through Dylan.
Yeah.
I was raised in Oklahoma, north of
Oh
Tulsa.
my God. Okay. You never went to a Dylan camp?
No, I didn't even know about him. I don't even think my parents knew about him. Yeah.
Wait. Okay, wait. Should I ask how old you are?
45.
Okay. Well, okay. We would have been.
But we're not ageist on the show. It's okay.
Yeah, we're not ageist on the show. That is the one rule.
Okay. Well, I'm 42, so
Okay.
there would have been.
There should have been
We
some.
would have been kind of on the cusp of things because, see, when I went, I was like 14. That was my first one. So you would have already been in high school.
Yeah.
And the first one, it was like they only had a few older kids like me. So I had to be like a junior counselor for all these little like 4-year-olds and stuff. So, so really, that was kind of how I started going, but I never really went as a camper. Like I went as a junior counselor because there just weren't enough kids my age. So, but I started doing that. Like I went to Tulsa like every summer and did that.
Wow.
Probably starting in 1994-ish. Yeah, that would have been, and then when I was a senior in high school, or when I was a junior in high school, one of my friends who was a senior from Parsons, Kansas, went back to Korea and did like the Dylan International, like I think it was called a Motherland tour back then. And when my friend Parker did it, I was like, oh, I want to do that too. So I told my parents, and so the next year after I graduated, I went with Dylan to go to Korea. And so since I was a Holt baby, like I had to stop at the Holt office, like they give you a day to kind of do that. And went through my file and I said, hey, do you think that I could meet my birth parents, my birth mom? And this social worker was like, that's not how that works. Like, you've got to go back to, I'm like, what?
We've got a
No.
whole process. What are you doing
Yeah,
just showing up here?
yeah,
Coming in here with your
exactly.
American ideals and be like,
Yeah.
yo, can I meet my birth mom? Is that cool? Like,
Exactly.
you think we just know where she is?
I'm like, this is a small country. Can't you guys find her? For real, that's what I was thinking. So, they like, so it was funny. She was like, that's not how that works. You've got to go back to the United States and then we do a search and then maybe like next year you can come back. And I was like, what? So I like had never really thought about that process of like searching for birth family. But I think going back to Korea, I was in it, like I was totally like, oh my God, I was born here, So I started crying, like wailing, like hyperventilating. And the social worker, she couldn't have been much older than me. She was probably like 22, and I was 18 or something. I'm just guessing. And so I like left the office thinking like I'm never gonna find my birth family, and I'm okay with that. Like that's just not in it for me. And then she called like a few days later, like and talked to one of the social workers who was like running our tour, and she was like, I just want to let you know, Michelle's birth mother, we contacted her. She wants to meet her. And so she actually took a train last night to Seoul. It was like,
What?
Oh, wow.
but at that point, we had already left on a tour bus to go south to Busan. But like we were going from like Seoul, and we stopped in like Gyeongju. We like did all these other little stops first. So the long story short is that my Korean family is intact. My birth mother and my birth father are still married. And then I have 3 full-blooded biological sisters, 2 of
Wow.
which are older and 1 is younger. And so the way the story goes, and it's been interesting because it's kind of changed a little bit over time. But basically, they were married, and my oldest sister is probably, I want to say she's probably 3 years older than me. And I should know this because I've known her now since I'm 18, but I just refuse to put that in my brain, I guess. And then my second oldest sister is a year and a half older than me, about. And then, so imagine this, like this woman has a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. She's married to this guy who has taken a job kind of like on a ship. So he's like overseas a lot. And so she's basically pregnant with her 3rd child. And she's like, why would I want 3 kids under 3 years old and no help, So,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think she was really thinking that, but I think she was like, what are we going to do? We're poor. And hopefully this kid will be a boy. I think that's probably what she was thinking. So, so I've heard 2 different versions, that like one that my father's oldest brother, who's like 20 years older than my father, was like giving pressure for my mother to have a son. And then she didn't have a son. So that was one version. The second version was she went to the hospital, which was a free clinic in Busan, and gave birth to me. No one came and saw me or saw her. And so she was like, well, what am I doing trying to have 3 kids, and living like a single mom? So it doesn't matter. The end result is that she relinquished me right there. And then when she came home, it wasn't long after, she told my birth father that I had died at birth. And then when he came home, he got her pregnant right away. And so my youngest sister is like 14 months younger than me. So I was born in October and she was born the next December. So, and so he was home, so they kept her. So she had carried that secret with her for 18 years, that she had this 3rd child living in the United States. And then it wasn't until I came back to Korea and was like, I want to look at my file, that someone called her and was like, hey, did you have a daughter on this day? Because she's in Korea if you want to meet her. So imagine this woman, in her 40s, having to tell her husband, oh yeah, remember that child that died at birth? Actually, that child's not dead. And actually, that child is here in Korea if you want to meet her. And so they had to call my 2 oldest sisters from college to come back, and they had to tell them the news. And then they, all as a family, took like literally the midnight train to Seoul to come see me. But we had already gotten on the bus to go to Busan. So it took like, I can't remember exactly. I'd have to get out my journal, but it took like, a couple of days for us to meet. But like every day I was given new information. Like it was like, and then your father thought you were dead. And then you have a sister, it was always like these new things that I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. So fast forward to like 2016, I was living in Seattle, and my sister was living in Korea. And she had already lived in the States for a little bit, but like had to go back to Korea, and her green card was gonna run out if she didn't come back into the country. If she let like a year go by. So I said, why don't you live with us in Seattle? So she came to Seattle and lived with us. And then I not stupidly, put her on a dating app. And then she met her husband, Steve, and they got married in Minneapolis. And now they live in Texas. So it's kind of interesting. My birth sister lived with us for a while, and then got married, and now is really
That's
happy.
wild.
Wow.
That's
it's
so wild.
It's wild because I don't know of anyone who's actually had the experience of bringing their birth family to the States and living
Yeah.
with them and kind of taking on that responsibility. Because at first it was like, we had to get her services. We had to get her, she had no income. She had nothing. And it was like she needed some help to kind of get reacquainted into the United States and all those things. Because of like the way our family is, like I found out later that my birth mom had a sister in San Francisco. So then I met her.
Whoa. So you've been in reunification with like a lot of your birth family.
Oh yeah. Well, now everybody, like all the uncles and aunts, cousins, but it's taken time. So like that was 1998. Then I came back in 2000, and I remember they were like, "Oh, well, we just told our family about you." And I'm like, "It took you 2 years? Like what?" Because I think that they had to deal with the shame, of like they had to figure out. And even like in 2009, we went back. My husband and I were married for about a year, and we went back for like a Korean wedding. They wanted to do a Korean wedding. I did not want to do that because we were already married, but they insisted on it. And so when we went back, it was really interesting because that's when I found out that they hadn't told their friends about me. So it was just a strange thing because they have to protect themselves in Korean culture. And sometimes I don't agree with that. And I have gotten kind of heated about it. Like, I'm sorry that you're ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not going to like, if you're too ashamed of me, then I can't be in the same space as you.
Right.
Sure.
I don't quite say it that harshly, but I know that they have, but then, as you get older, things change too. Cause it's like, well, you have to do whatever to protect yourself and live your life. Like if it's going to ruin your life, then don't bring me up. I'm fine. Like, whatever. But
culturally, we're different too. I mean, there's a lot of difference. We've heard this too. That a lot of times there's a lot of Korean culture that is like ashamed of it and they don't talk about it and they try to just, pretend it's not there.
Have you ever had a Korean person tell you, like, I always say Korean? Have you ever had a Korean person tell you like, "Oh, I'm so sorry you're adopted. That's too bad. That's a shame. Have you ever had anyone say that to you?"
Yes, and in a way more like where they're ashamed that we don't know more about our culture as well. So it's not just oh, I'm sorry. It's oh, I'm sorry. That you don't speak Korean or you don't know more about your heritage and things like that. So
Yeah.
I've heard that pretty
Yeah,
frequently.
I mean, in my experience, it's more been like they feel the weight of like adoption on themselves and like, oh, I'm so sorry that this was your upbringing, and well, come here, let me give you all the food and show you how to, those kinds of things. It's
Oh,
not
well, that's
like it's
actually
not like
lovely.
not like a oh man, that must be so tough for you. It's more just like I'm so sorry for your existence. Let me help
that's both.
try to reconcile that. That's the side of it that I've experienced.
Yeah, I think I've had both experiences. I think the shame style of experiences have been fewer and further between for me personally, but I will say that I've spoken to plenty of Korean adoptees who have not had that a pleasant experience with any other Korean people because they're adoptees.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't imagine trying to navigate that, and especially navigating it within your own family post reunion should that happen.
Especially when you were originally thought to be a ghost. You're like, I'm
Right.
a real ghost?
Exactly.
I know. Well, it's so weird because a lot of people, even just recently, someone DM'd me and they were like, "You're so lucky you found your birth family." And there are a lot of days when I do feel more lucky than I don't feel lucky. You know, I feel
Mhm.
like really fortunate that I have that knowledge. But then there's like a lot of things that you just don't get. Like you would think that after knowing them for more than 20 years that I would have closure on where I was born or the conditions of my birth or even health things. I don't know any of those answers because Korean people tend to be silent on a lot of those things.
Mm.
Or because they still want to save face, they don't tell you the whole truth.
Mm.
And and I don't mean to bash Korean people because I actually really love Korean culture and love my birth family, but it still seems conditional. You know, it doesn't necessarily seem unconditional. It's not like it was like, "Oh my gosh, this is great. This is, the best thing that's ever happened to me. Forget all these things that happened in my life here or whatever." It was actually really complex and it made it more complicated for me to embrace Korean culture because I was like, well, shit, now like you guys aren't helpful either,
You're like, do I want to
Right.
get into this
Yeah,
culture that seems to have a lot of baggage? Because I got plenty of my own.
yeah,
I don't know that I need extra baggage.
and then there's this whole thing about the Korean appearance, so it's like,
Yeah.
even when I was like 120 pounds, it was like, oh, you should really lose some weight, or maybe just get your nose in just a little bit, or,
Mhm.
oh, your skin is too dark, like all this stuff that I was not willing to really change.
Mhm.
And it's like not even people trying to be mean to you. That was
This
the
is how it
culture
is.
then. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
Right.
you're gonna get your butt grabbed and your arms grabbed, and someone's gonna go, "Oh, kundang," or like whatever, and you're like, "Okay, that's cool, I
And you're
guess."
like, my BMI is fine, thank you. Get out of here.
I mean, no one does that now, but I mean, maybe it's because I'm just now I'm considered maybe, an older person, so they won't do it. But like, I mean, I remember they wanted to buy me like all these things to make up for lost time, and so they took me to the the department store, and it was like the people would be like, no, you cannot buy here. Because I was
You're
too
like,
big.
yeah, you're not gonna fit.
Yeah, I was like a size
Oh.
6, and I was like,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
no, we only serve
Like-
00, and I'd be
Like
like,
in Korea, size 6 is size 40. And you're like, what?
yeah. I literally remember them so then my family took me to the market, like, Namdaemun or something, or Itaewon, I can't remember. It was probably Namdaemun. Literally held up these big, giant underwear. Like, it was like, I don't know what size they thought I was. I was just like, how can you not conceptually understand that my butt is not that big? Like, it was literally like 4XL. But that's the only place I could buy clothes, even back in the 90s, because it was like, oh, I'm a size 6. That's way too fat, apparently.
Mhm.
So it's just stuff like that, like, your self-esteem is just not going to get lifted just by going to Korea and hanging out with your Korean family. And then, just not ever really knowing the truth, whether they forget, like you have to have some sort of forgiveness to your birth family because it's like, well, you're probably not going to get the full truth, even if you can look them right in the face and ask them directly. They're probably not going to give it to you, or you'll get a version of it, but it's going to be, a little bit, glossed over. And even I think when people, that's the thing, when even they go back to Korea or back to their birth countries and try to get information from the adoption agency, a lot of the social workers also gloss over stuff, and they advocate more for the birth families than they do for the children, for the adoptees,
Mhm.
or at least we've seen that, so yeah, you just have to be kind of content with like never knowing, like, never knowing. My sister's really good because she'll translate, she'll ask things, but it's still dependent on my family giving the right information. And a lot of times it's like, well, this is what they said last time, but here's what I really think, so
Yeah.
okay,
Right.
whatever.
They have that Nietzsche to read between the lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really frustrating. It's really
Yeah.
frustrating.
I can
Or
only
has
imagine
been.
how frustrating that would be. Yeah. I think something that really sticks out to me is that you went to a culture camp, not as a participant, but as a counselor to fill a space. And then that led you, and this was in high school, and then that led you to going to Korea. And then going to Korea at 18 immediately turned into a reunion. And I think why that's so wild to me is just the really condensed and early timeline that this is happening on. Because I think we had a lot of conversations with other adoptees who have been in reunion where it's taken a long time, or even just like us, it took a long time for us to even get to a point where we're even approaching culture in a
It took a long
meaningful
time for
way.
us to even hear about camps.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. To even know what a camp was. Exactly. And I think that really sticks out to me because it's again a testament to how unique every adoptee's story is, to where we can continue to uncover new things that are happening, new experiences that we can have in a lot of these similar areas. And I know that you've been involved and immersed, kind of maybe not in adoptee culture, but adoption culture specifically, as well as getting rooted in like your Korean culture and heritage. And I know that you've done a lot of work in both of those spaces. So I was wondering how being in reunion and how getting those experiences earlier on, did that fuel you or play a pivotal role in making decisions to work with certain organizations or doing certain things within those spaces? Or was it really, do you feel like that was kind of a trajectory that you would have found yourself on anyway, just because it seems like you took the initiative? You know, I can think of a couple people who have taken initiatives around some of this stuff, but especially within your story, very much like going to get after it immediately. Where like me, I'm like 30 and I'm like, yeah, I guess I'll try and do stuff now.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe.
I mean, you're just living your life. You know what I mean? And to me, it's like I feel like a lot of the stuff that's happened to me has been dumb luck, and I don't want to be like, oh, the universe, it was meant to be. But I mean, I wasn't really some sort of like activist kid who was like, I need this camp, like, it was
I
literally
will go
like,
to camp.
yeah, I mean, I just was kind of like, oh, that sounds like fun. Gee,
Yeah.
and it was like a week away from my parents. Hell yeah, sign me up. And back then I thought Tulsa was so cool too, so it was like, yeah, so I'm gonna go to Tulsa.
Tulsa
I'm
was
gonna
cool.
hang out.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're gonna
Sorry, I
go-
had to laugh at that one for a second.
It's fine now, but yeah, back then you'd be like, really, Tulsa?
Sorry,
Tulsa's the
Oklahomans
place
that
you
are
wanna-
listening.
Wait,
Friends and
did you ever
family.
grow up going to Casa Bonita? Did you ever do
Oh
that?
yes,
Oh yeah.
it's reopening here in
Bonita.
Denver.
Yeah.
Is it
That's
really?
that's a whole nother story, but it got
Yeah.
bought out by Matt Stone and Trey Parker from South Park,
No, because
the
of
one
the
in
puppet?
Denver, and it's being reopened. So
Is it because of
there's
the
only two of
puppet?
them, or there were only two of them, Denver and Tulsa.
Oh my god.
Side note.
That is
Yeah,
an
sorry.
experience.
It was like, yeah, I mean, Tulsa was like it.
Yeah,
And,
Tulsa was it. Hey, you had Silver Dollar City, as I've said before
oh
in the
my
past.
gosh.
No, SDC is not great.
What?
SDC is like a bastion
Okay,
of
fine.
white
You have
people
worlds
culture
of fun
from-
and oceans of fun in Kansas City.
Oh my gosh. This is like the way that
Yikes.
machine. Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're in the same
Yeah.
with the
Hey,
same basic youth.
my first job was Brahms, by the way. So
Oh my gosh, Brahms is so good. And then you could buy
Brahms
milk
Boys is
there.
back.
You could buy
Brahms Boys is back.
just had to throw it out there to someone else who knows it. So
Yeah, because early in the show, Nathan and I would reminisce about Brahms, and Patrick would be like, "What is Brahms?" And
I'm
Brahms
in
is so
Indiana. I
good.
don't know what that is. So
Yeah.
Brahms and like Whataburger. I loved
Mhm.
Whataburger.
Yeah.
What else
Yep.
did I love? Oh my gosh. Okay.
That's
Anyway, yes. Okay, so I think a lot of it was kind of just like dumb luck. Like, I mean, I don't even know how I got a Dylan newsletter in the mail. Like,
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like, as a Holt kid, I don't know how I got it in the mail, other than I
Mhm.
may have gone to a Dylan thing when I was like 4, because we did live outside of Tulsa when I was in kindergarten, just for 1 year. And so, yeah, I'm sure we went to like one Dylan days or something, and then 10 years later they send out newsletters or something. I don't know. But I will say that
Must have
meeting,
missed that.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I literally, like, how did you find me? I have no idea.
I'm calling my parents after this interview.
Yeah.
Guys, did you ever get a Dylan letter?
They threw it away, they said.
Yeah, they probably did. We don't need this.
Exactly. Well, no, so I have really no idea, but and it was like just this little blurb about camp. And I remember I just asked my mom, and my mom was like, yeah, if that's what you want to do, that's totally cool. And so, we had like a host family. So you stayed with another adoptive family and their kids. And I would say I did not realize how much that gave me in terms of confidence. Because it was like, it wasn't about seeing other Asian kids. It was about seeing other Korean adoptees. Even if they were like 10 years younger than me, it was still like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. There are a bunch of you guys down here, And there were a couple of girls that year who were like my age or a little bit older, so that was exciting. They didn't end up coming back, but I got to meet kids my first year, who were my age. And then meeting my birth family and going to Korea was like totally a life-changing event. I mean, that was like, holy shit, like what am I going to do with this information now? And then, what do I want to be more interested in Korean culture, period? I mean, at camp, I never was really interested in the culture of things, even though we did culture things. I was just more interested in the other adoptees.
Mm-hmm.
But now it was like, well, I had this opportunity to go to, I went to the University of Kansas and they had Korean language. So I studied Korean language for 2 years and got pretty decent at Korean language. And then now have forgotten all of it. Yeah, I just know enough to be like, I like that. I don't like that. It's too expensive. That's delicious. My stomach hurts.
I should learn.
I like that sequence of events right there. That's those are the phrases I need to learn.
I've learned all of them, except I should probably learn my stomach hurts. I also don't know like bathroom. I know toilet, but I don't know. I could probably figure it out. But
화장실 is bathroom. 화장실.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
There we go.
I was like, I could probably cobble it together, but
yeah. I mean,
That's
all
funny.
you have to do is say the word and someone will point. The worst. Like, I remember I was like learning stuff like asking legitimate questions like, well, which way to the department store or whatever.
¿Dónde está la biblioteca?
And then someone would give me these long directions, and I'd be like, okay, forget it. That was
I
stupid,
wasn't trained in listening. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
You ask like how much something is, and then they give it to you, and you're like, well, that was fun. That was a good practice. Can you
Great
write it down for
exercise.
me?
Was
Yeah.
ready for
I'm
the
an
response.
American. I don't listen at all.
Yeah.
I just say things loudly.
Yeah. So I just so that happened to be a turning point in my life, but I didn't like earn it. I didn't like seek it out. I didn't do. I mean, I guess in some ways I took the steps, but I had no idea that we were going to meet my birth family. And in fact, if I knew that, I think I would have had my mom and dad go. Not that they could have afforded it. I mean, it was really hard. It was kind of a hardship for us to go, but like we would have probably made that happen. Nonetheless, my birth mom and my mom met each other, I want to say in 2016 when we
Wow.
moved to Seattle. So, no, before that, because when my aunt, okay, let me tell you another quick story. My birth mother and father told me when I was in college. So after I had already met them, like 2 years later, they were like, by the way, your mom has a sister who's living in the United States. And I was like, what? So she was an older sister of my birth mother. And so I would talk to her on the phone. And then one year, like in 2010, I went to go meet her. So like, this is like I graduated 8 years after, and met her. And it was interesting because she, had a life partner and all this stuff. But she had said, I never knew you existed. If I had known that you were born, I would have adopted you. And that was mind blowing too, because I was like, no, thank you. I'm like, no, thank you. But cool. And so then a couple of years later, she actually went into like liver failure. She had like all these problems. And so my birth mom was like, I need to say goodbye to my sister. They hadn't seen each other in like 20 years, but just talked on the phone a lot. So my birth mother is flying into San Francisco. My birth aunt is like actively dying. And they were like, hold on, because your sister's coming. So my birth mother lands in San Francisco, gets to the hospital, literally holds on to her sister's hand, and she dies. Like
Wow.
she dies within the hour of my birth mother landing in San Francisco. Wow. So then at the same time, like we had already booked our tickets. So I was going to San Francisco, and then my mom was like, well, oh my gosh, if your birth mom's coming, then I need to come too. So it was like we were all merging and coming into San Francisco, but like had nowhere to stay because like my aunt had already died. So we stayed with my aunt's friend, and she took care of us for like 4 days, which was really nice. But yeah, so that changed like everybody's life, like just having these weird set of circumstances that kept bringing us together, I guess. And yeah, I don't know if it like did anything I don't think it made me like an activist for adoption or whatever,
Mhm.
but it definitely made me have a heart for everybody involved
Mhm.
because there are times when you're like, you know, screw these people, screw this situation. These people didn't care about me, and then F this because I don't belong here either. And
Right.
then when you actually go, like, you know, when you're in that situation, then you go, wow, I can understand why you did what you did, or I can understand at least how difficult that was for you. I've also gone to unwed mothers' homes, and that's a really intense experience. I don't know if they still do that, but they used to line up women, like pregnant women, like at this table, and we would, as adoptees, sit there and ask questions back and forth. It was gut wrenching. Like none of these mothers wanted to give their children away. None of them wanted to relinquish them, but felt like they would not have a future in Korea. You know, because the saying is like, once you're an orphan, you're always an orphan. Like sometimes you don't even get like you can't find jobs, like all kinds of crazy stuff because of the way that the system is.
Yep.
And it's like, I don't know. I just have never met a birth mother who was like, screw these kids. You know, like I don't
Sure.
want anything to do with them. One time we went back and there was a daughter, a girl who was like 16, and they located her birth mom, and so they asked the birth mom if she would meet her, and the birth mom said, I can't meet you. I'm remarried. I have a toddler. My husband has no idea that you exist. And so I don't know what happened, but the birth mother had a change of heart, shows up at Eastern where we were staying. I think it's like Eastern. It used to be Eastern Child Welfare Society. Now it's like Eastern something else, and I always get it confused. But anyway, the mom shows up, looks exactly like the daughter. Like exactly. It was mind blowing. I have never seen that again. Because when I met my birth family, I was like, can you guys show me proof that we're we're related? Because I don't
Yeah.
think we look alike
Don't
at
need
all.
it in there.
Yeah. um, but like looked exactly the same. And then when we left Korea, and so then she kept sneaking back. The mom kept sneaking back to come, you know, be with her daughter, and then she would like bring her the toddler son. So I'm sure that son's now like 20, thinking like, what the hell was that, you know? Um, but like when we left Korea, we leave on a bus, and back then we would also take babies to escort back to the United States. So we had like babies with us. They're crying, you know, everyone's crying because we're leaving Korea. And then this birth mother shows up unexpectedly to say goodbye to her birth daughter, literally like throws herself in front of the bus, like is and like pounding her chest and like rubbing it. I mean, just like inconsolable. I've just never met a birth mother who didn't really care for their child or like thinks about their child. And so I'm sure that there are people like that who exist. I've just never met any of them. And so when I
Yeah.
see stuff like that, yes, sometimes I get really angry about my adoption, but at the same time, it's like you see what I know what my life would have been. Um, so I don't have a lot of like, um, I guess, frustrations with adoption. I mean, I do and I
Yeah.
don't. It doesn't eat at me like it used to, probably.
Yeah.
Or maybe because it happened when I was so young, it didn't. You know, I didn't have a chance to let that kind of that feeling grow, I guess.
Well, I think
Because
also
I had this
you
other.
got involved with so much of the system and got to see so much of it at an earlier age too. You know, I think a lot of people come and when they start to come to terms with their adoption, I think, and become critical of the system, we're also caveating, you know, this both and I love my family, but you know, like I'm learning all this stuff about adoption
Yeah,
that's like doesn't really line up with everything that I've been told about it. And I think for in your case, I feel like you got so much experience early on that you're able to build like I think adoptees are naturally empathic, but you were able to build like a level of empathy with all the different parts of the constellation. I think that's something that's really important that adoptees don't necessarily get access to or have the opportunity to. Like you said, you know, it was luck almost. A lot of it was luck to you to get to that point. So
yeah, I do think it was luck in many ways. My parents were like super cool, but like they were farmers. You know, they weren't like woke people being like, you need to go to camp and you need to do all this or be. I mean, there are lots of times when my dad just was like, I was really scared that you were going to Korea and potentially meeting your birth family. Like, I did not want you
mm,
to do that at all. You know, but it's like, well, he was also like, "You're also 18, so what could I have done to support you?" But I mean, when I came back, my dad was like, "I'm still your dad. You know that, right?" Like he was kind of mad. I was like, "Yeah, of course." Um, so it's weird. Yeah, I do think just just the way things worked and the way I had that introduction earlier, I definitely think built some sort of like inner confidence in me about my adoption, but it didn't prepare me still for like being out in the world as an Asian looking person. So that's
Sure.
what I'm pissed off about most of the time now.
Absolutely.
Because you go out in the world and people don't know that you're Charles and Sharon's daughter, or don't know that you had this like Missouri upbringing and you're probably more redneck than any of them, not to say that I'm a redneck, but you know what I mean? Like I just had
You want to talk about ag? I'll talk about ag.
let's talk about ag. I mean, seriously, like
I did the dairy
country
competitions.
yeah, I was in FFA for a year.
Yeah,
I mean,
FFA.
Whoa.
My wife and I were just talking about FFA the other day. That's funny.
yes,
I literally had
yeah.
never heard about that until I moved to the Midwest. And then I was like, I thought that was just a joke in Napoleon Dynamite. I didn't know people did this for real.
No, it's
They
a real
do.
thing.
It's a real thing, and it's a serious thing. Like, don't mess with FFA.
Yeah, once
kids.
we
Like,
moved to Springfield, I was like, oh, okay.
wait, Springfield, where?
Missouri.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I lived in Springfield for
We have
number of years.
you intersect
Spread
with
out
us in a
everywhere.
lot
Yeah.
of places.
Yeah.
You've
So, like,
intersected
so
with us
I'm-
in a lot of places, I think.
I was raised in Dallas, Texas, and then my wife and I lived in Springfield for like a decade, basically, and we just
What
recently
years?
moved back. We lived there from well, I guess we were in the Midwest for a decade. We lived in Springfield from 2015 to now, basically, or to
Oh,
last year.
dang. Okay. So I was there from 2003 to 2010.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And it's funny because like the best Korean restaurants, in my opinion, are in Springfield. And I have a lot of great friends in Springfield.
They got some good Korean food there.
Yes, they do. Did you go to Sue's?
Yes, it didn't make it through the pandemic, but that place was
What?
baller.
It
Yeah.
didn't?
Sorry to break the news.
Oh, no.
No.
I am so sorry to be the bearer of bad
Janchi
news.
Show.
It's not an exclusive, but it is an exclusive to Michelle. So
Oh
apologies,
my
but they
God.
did just open a Korean fried chicken joint, which I'm super excited about. So
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I mean,
Well, it's
that's
funny because I loved Springfield. I loved the people. Like, I met my husband there. We technically got married in that time, even though I refused to get married in Springfield. So we got married in Hawaii. But like, but at the same time, I had some of the most racist shit happen to me in Springfield. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, just at work, like professional racism or something.
Mhm.
Like it was like, well, Michelle, I have said this. So people in the news have heard me say this story a million times. But I remember one of our managers said, someone asked like, "Hey, are we going to have like a Spanish speaking newscast like our competitor because we have such a big Hispanic population?" And our manager said, "Well, minorities only make up 3% of the population here, so there's just really no business plan for them." And I complained, and I got in trouble because I complained, and they were like, "We
Yeesh.
know that you complained. We know that it was you." And so I was like, I felt like I was, blacklisted forever. And on top of that, I said during contract negotiations, I, said like, "Well, doesn't it matter that I'm the first Asian American to anchor this, particular newscast or whatever?" And my boss was like, "No, because there just aren't enough Asian people to care. Like nobody cares about that." I also had people like call me Michelle Kwan, like whatever, Kronnie
Yeah.
Chung. That's pretty typical. But people used to call and complain about me in Springfield, like, "Get that damn Jap off TV. That's so disrespectful that she would be, covering that Memorial Day ceremony." And I mean, just crazy stuff that I was so afraid that if people kept calling that I would lose my job,
Yeah.
because they already said there's no business plan for us. So
Right.
Right.
why would I be protected? So Springfield was cool, but also Springfield, none of those managers are still there.
Right. But
um,
like, yeah, Springfield's like a great place to be, except for when it's not. And then it's like a really terrible place to be. Well, and that's,
like,
I mean, like I'm literally a part of a Facebook group for ethnic, like BIPOC, like young professionals who are like, "Hey, everybody, are you okay?" Because like
yeah,
even 10 years on, it's not like it's a little bit better, but it's not that much better. And
yeah,
I mean, it's crazy because 2020, everything breaks. pandemic and all that stuff. And you know how there are just loud trucks with American/Confederate flags in the back,
sure.
you know, just driving down the street. I mean, like literally in the same way that you were like, I was very afraid to lose my job. And just like, that was Springfield for me was the place where I learned to be afraid of how I looked. Because like, I had never borne that. I'd never carried that. Obviously, like being raised by white people, didn't even think about race. And so like Springfield like was such a moment for me to self-racialize, and was just such a like an intense, just an intense atmosphere. And I was grateful that I had this group, and I had especially a couple of other Asian Americans and Asian American women specifically who I could talk to about this, who weren't adoptees, to like be like, how am I supposed to feel? I don't understand what this is like. Which is crazy. And I think leads us to kind of the next thing we wanted to talk to you about is specifically, I mean, and I'll say just because I have my finger very, very, very far away from the pulse. But like
KJ's off pulse for sure.
Yeah, I'm just like, my head is deep under a rock. But I'd heard your story. I'd heard your story about the dumplings and the phone call and the voicemail and all those things. And I was like, oh man, that's terrible. And then later learned that you were an adoptee. And I was like, what? And then later learned about #VeryAsian. And so it's just like kind of a weird, like I learned about this in all the wrong order. But it's what's just like amazing to me and astounding. And knowing your story now, I think it makes sense for some of the experiences you've had. But what has this moment been, whether it was the training ground that was Springfield, Missouri, or just like in terms of coming to the fullness of your Koreanness and your Asian Americanness and all those things, and starting Very Asian. But like, how is that adoptee perspective? Given that history, like, I don't know, how does it feel? I guess maybe is the question.
Yeah, well,
to be an adoptee and have Very Asian be your thing, and to be kind of like that leader in that sense.
See, it's weird because like I walk out of my house and nobody knows that I'm the Very Asian lady except for my direct neighbors, so I'm like, do people know what's is it a big deal? Like, I don't even know, it's weird when you have two. Well, because I've never been viral before, right? So it's like you don't really understand this concept of like you can have an identity online and an identity at school. I mean, at your home, because I'm still like taking my kid to daycare to his preschool, and they don't give a shit. They have like no idea. So to me, it's like this is so bizarre, and also it just all lives, like on your phone or your computer, and so I'm like, is this real? And then you have people who are in actual spaces like this, and they're like, well, don't, when your 15 minutes is up, then what kind of actionable change are you going to bring to the table? And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't even know I was going to do this,
Yeah. So somebody just threw 15 minutes at me. Like, what?
And then I was like, well, and this is the thing that sucks, is because then you start being like, oh shit, man, I'm not even very Asian, like I'm really not very Asian. But I will say this whole movement sounds even sillier coming out of your mouth. But what it has done is actually given me confidence to be like, no, you don't get to say who's Asian and who's not Asian. Because when I walk out that door, nobody knows my background. Nobody knows my life. I could walk outside and someone could shoot me because they don't understand who I am. They don't take the time to know who I am. They just see an Asian face. So I'm not going to be apologetic for how I came into this world. I'm not going to be apologetic how I bring culture into my life. At the end of the day, this is who I am. So, and that's why I think actually resonated with people, because I got a lot of response from transracial adoptees, people who are of mixed race, people who are in the LGBTQ community, people who feel like they have been defined as this, well, in the media, I mean, I'm a part of that too, but like giving us this broad brushstroke of who we are. We're just, we're not a monolith, and it's, to me, it's this idea of like, who gets to define anything? Like, go fuck off, like, it's just like, because at the end of the day, when, for example, growing up in the Midwest as Asian is also like kind of intimidating, because then you're like, man, those West Coast Asians are real woke out there, and I don't think I'm Asian enough. Well, I lived on the West Coast and discovered that like so many Asian people don't know their own culture either. I worked with Korean people in my newsroom who grew up in affluent Korean families and had like very Korean traditions. And I remember one time this woman came up to me. She's like, "Hey, can you translate Korean for me?" And I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "I don't speak that." And I'm like, "Okay, but like, you're like legit Korean." She's like, "Yeah, I know, but don't you know Korean? I thought you did." And I was like, "Well, I do, but not really." Like we're just
Well,
like,
I
Like
do
you
know it.
should.
yeah, like you're the one who's supposed to know.
Like, have you
this.
seen my parents?
I know. So it's like, so to me, that gave me confidence. And then also, it just naturally happened and wasn't like seeking it out, but like all my girlfriends were Asian in Seattle, all my close ones.
Mm.
And there was so much that when we would talk, we actually didn't know about each other's cultures or supposed cultures, and also didn't know about our own cultures. So I was like,
Mhm.
oh, so this is all bullshit. Like none of you guys know anything, you know? And so it's like kind of like, well, why? So then really I should embrace the fact that I have made that effort to bring culture into my life, been intentional about the things that I bring into my life. And that should be rewarded. I mean, if not by anybody else, by me, you know? So I'm
Yeah.
not going to let some nasty person say like, well, she needs to keep her Korean to herself, because even if I wanted to, I couldn't. And I remember even being in college, like when I was like, after going to Korea, I was like, I've been to the motherland. I'm going to learn this culture. I'm going to learn this language, and I'm going to fit in. Well, what did I do? I hung out with Korean kids for like the first semester of my college life, and they were assholes to me. They were like, well, you're too whitewashed. You're not diverse enough. And I was like, well, we're in the science library and you're hanging out with Korean people only speaking Korean. So therefore I am more diverse. So I was like, let's be honest. I got more people that I'm hanging out with. And I remember, it just made me feel so bad because those kids are making me feel bad too. And in reality, we're all learning and trying on new things as we're getting older. Their brains aren't fully developed. Mine wasn't either. So it's like, I don't fault them, but I'm just saying, like, at some point I had to be like, this is who you are. You are an adoptee. You are Michelle Sherwood. Like, this is just who you are. If people can't handle it, that's their problem. You're going to have to find a way to love yourself. And of course, that manifests in different ways, and you're not always going to get it right. And it's always trial and error. But I was like, I'm not going to get support 100% from the Korean community, and I'm not going to get 100% from the white community. So I just going to have to give it to myself, I guess, so yeah, so it's really weird to be a part of like this very Asian thing, knowing that I am not very Asian. And at the same time, I think it's beautiful because I think a lot of people are tired of letting other people define very Asian for them.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, especially for the adoptee community too. I think just as we just passed Lunar New Year for myself specifically, this imposter syndrome of feeling very Asian or Asian enough that I can cook an Asian meal, a Korean meal, and still be Korean, but yet never. This is the second time I've ever cooked it, I've ever had it, and I'm 45, so all of a sudden I'm having this dish.
We're not ageist on the show, Nathan.
Yeah, dude.
So it's just funny that feel. I think that's what kind of what you're saying is it. No one should judge us, and we shouldn't judge ourselves as well.
Yeah, because we're always because that's the thing. Like then I started being like, well, gosh, now I'm feeling like an imposter because I don't celebrate Lunar New Year. And then I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let anyone define that for me. Like, yes, we do some Lunar New Year things, but only because I've got other friends who do it. And really, it's just about eating food. So get over it. It's fine,
I mean, and there's sometimes money involved. So.
Yeah, and some sort of card game that we've found out about, but we haven't played yet.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Okay, so can I just say one thing?
Yeah,
that's
go for
one thing I panicked about, because when I said I ate dumpling soup because that's what a lot of Koreans do, I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna get my Korean card taken away from me, because it really was dokguk, which is rice cake.
Yeah,
that's not dumplings.
Not dumplings.
I mean, if you put mandu in there,
I put
fine.
mandu in mine.
Yeah.
So
but
it was.
I panicked a little bit because I saw on one of the Korean threads, like, why did she say dumplings? And I was like, oh man. But then it's like, well, whatever. So it's just this idea of like, I'm going to stop being apologetic for who I am. Like, it's just, and if that's what we can get out of it, and I'm going to take that as far as I can.
I really love what you're saying, because I think it's so in line with the ethos of this show. And honestly, I think one of the reasons it really was important to me, and I know a lot of people in the adoptee community specifically, to see an adoptee leading this movement. Not to say that you're the leader, but you
But you're
got
the
thrust
leader.
in this
It's fine.
position unexpectedly. You didn't ask for this, but not only did you react in a very professional way, just to get the word out there, but I think your initial response, was really powerful, because in that and knowing that you're an adoptee made me feel seen and heard. And I think pre-Atlanta, I hate to use Atlanta as like a milestone date, but it was March 16th. Like pre-Atlanta, we were having conversations, I was with other adoptees, about how do we find ourselves at the table where adoptee voices are heard and are represented? Like, how do we do that? And then Atlanta happened, and I think for whatever reason, like, some of that went to the side, and we just started saying, we are enough. We need to be at the table now, because it doesn't matter. They're going to kill us anyway. They're going to come after us anyway.
Mhm.
And I think we, as we've done on the show, as we've continued to amplify voices, as we've seen allies and from outside of the community start to amplify our voices as well, I think knowing that it's a Korean adoptee specifically, but for us, but just an adoptee in general, leading this really broad Pan-Asian movement that has really taken the world by storm. Like, it's not like it wasn't just a week-long news thing and then it was gone. Like, this is here to stay, and this is something that's going to be impacting our community for a long time, I think.
Do you think? Really?
I
Yes.
do.
I mean,
I think
really
that.
don't know. Like, I live in my bubble, so I'm like, do you really think it's going to stay? Because
I really do, because I think something I really love about you is that you're an amplifier and a supporter of other people. And like you said, you already been hanging out with diverse groups of friends and people. And I see that in your feed too. Like, the voices you amplify, it's not just one person or one type of group of people. It's across everyone. And I really, really love that. And I think that what you're doing with the foundation, with Very Asian, I think is speaks to that. It speaks to the fact that we have to be in solidarity, not only with each other, but we have to be in solidarity with as many people as possible if we're going to push back against the people of the world who are telling us that we're too Korean, or to keep our blackness or keep our queerness to ourselves. Keep your disabilities away from me. No, we can't do that. And we have to be working together in order to push back against that. And so I think one of the other questions that we wanted to ask you was, what is the foundation specifically? Like, what are you and Gia and whoever's involved looking to do with this? And like, what's the mission? What's the goal? What's year one look like?
oh God,
I don't know. It was just a lot of
I know.
Small
Well,
questions,
we're
that's fine.
it's so funny because it's like we've only been a foundation for like a week, and we're trying to figure all that stuff out.
You weren't like,
Yeah,
born
give us your
with the
strategic plan,
full-fledged
all of
Only
your
a
financial
week.
documents.
Like, here's our 10-year goal.
I mean, you've also already been on Ellen, so you're already,
Oh my
that's a
God.
pretty good start.
Yeah.
But I'm
It's
just
like
hoping,
Ellen, the
yeah.
Janchi Show.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's hard because so the mission right now is to amplify diverse AAPI NH voices, by raising money for organizations already doing great work. But and we said, I think what you actually said, our mission is to amplify diverse AAPI NH voices, through education, storytelling, and community partnerships, but by raising money for other groups.
Mhm.
So we gotta narrow that. I mean, make that a little bit more succinct. But basically, it's like we believe that API education should be in schools. We believe that every story is unique and worth sharing, and to get over to get past things like the model minority myth, or the monolith stories, that we each have unique, important stories, and they matter and they are equal. And then also, I think through community partnerships, how can we lift up other people in our community? For example, in St. Louis, we had a Chinatown that was 100 years old, from 1860 to like 1960. Well, Missouri became a state in 1920. So we've been here, and the fact that you can still go to a meeting, like a city council meeting, and someone can say, St. Louis is just a black and white city. Bullshit. It is not a black and white city. We have been here for not centuries. We've been here for a long time, for generations, and flourished. And so this idea, this erasure that's been happening all across the country, the fact that we don't teach our kids about the Exclusion Act, that we don't teach our kids about internment, that we don't celebrate like people like Anna Mae Wong, these are things that are problematic because they're American, and they're just because they're Asian American doesn't mean they're not American. These are very American stories. So anyway, so I'm just saying, so we raise money for groups like AAJA, because AAJA is not just for journalists. It actually calls people out. When ESPN years ago wrote Jeremy Lin is a chink in the armor, AAJA came out and said that's bullshit. That's not the language that you use. When Atlanta happened, AAJ came out and said, hey, you don't know if they're sex workers. Let's look at this language. So there are a lot of things like that AAJA does that not only builds equity in newsrooms, but also gives fair coverage so that it benefits everybody. So that's why I say through storytelling, because AAJA, journalists uncover community stories. And there are enough journalists, there are Asian American journalists all in every city, so we can amplify good stories or stories that need to be told. And then community partnerships is just like, getting history told, or helping our businesses, helping our AAPI businesses that have suffered during the pandemic or whatever it is. So it is pretty broad. And there are organizations already doing great work. My thing is, like I said to our small board, I said, I would really like to be able to say, hey, if a transracial adoptee wants to go to their birth country, but it's inequitable for them because now they're married and they've got kids and they can't just leave for 2 weeks, maybe we should have a scholarship for them. I know that there are adoption agencies that do that already, but maybe people don't want to be connected to an adoption agency. Maybe they want to be connected to people on the ground there who can help them or whatever. Maybe we should help people find a way to incorporate a culture into their life. So so that's kind of what I was on. I was like, we need to have scholarships and grants so that people can find out who they are, or invest in themselves in different ways that aren't tied to organizations as well. We've also seen a lot of incredible artwork over the last 4 weeks. So how do we help makers? Like, how do we help, promote people creating beautiful artwork or whatever it is, and amplify what they're doing? So, I mean, I've got like ideas in my head. What I really need to do is start with just our bylaws. We need a logo. We need a website. I mean, those are things that we need. But I find myself talking a million miles a minute because I actually find myself getting really passionate about it, because there's just so much stuff that's not happening for us. My son, my husband's white, my son is mixed. We can find a book about mixed children, but we can't find a story that reflects our family. Because I don't have Korean culture that I'm bringing into our life every day, or, his grandparents are white. So there are just a lot of different things that we don't have. And I would like to be able to find, in many ways, like be a hub of information where you're curating content. But this is like down the road,
So in like 6 months.
Yeah, 6 months. Yeah. I just see we're going. Yes. Yeah. So, because I just feel like we know that there are people out like us who exist in the world. So where's our content? What's in it for us?
I mean, that's what our show was born out of. It was like, where's our content? And we're like, if this is what we need, then we're going to make our own damn table and invite everybody to it. And I think like when you were like, do you think Very Asian has legs? Like, it absolutely does. And I know that because I remember some early conversations post Atlanta. You saw, Stop AAPI Hate coming out, and that was like the trending hashtag. But and then people were pushing back like, well, is there something like more, like you think about like Black Lives Matter, that's not just a means of protest, but it's also a means of celebration. It's a means of like saying, and I remember like, right after like I finally caught up to current events and started tracking Very Asian, I saw one creator mashed up. And I hope you've seen it, mashed up Very Asian and Sandra Oh's quote of, and so and it's just this beautiful art piece.
Yeah.
Yes, it's just an honor to. Yeah, it was. I'll have to find it. I'll send it to you. But it's just, I mean, it literally brought me to tears, and I think it speaks to the progression of Asian Americans having a moment where we begin to reckon with what does it mean to be Asian American in a way that maybe the Black community and indigenous communities and Native communities are like, well, we get what it means, like, because greater oppression, but greater diversity creates that whatever compress, whatever, like this is what we're born out of. And I think Asian Americans are seeing this and experiencing this, and very Asian is a hashtag that doesn't wrap itself up necessarily in stopping something. It's not necessarily reactionary, but in and of itself is something to be celebrated, and is born out of adversity, and is born out of like social justice and advocacy. But it's us advocating for ourselves. And I think, like, for me, like, just doubles, triples the weight, knowing that there is this incredible intersectionality of transracial adoption behind very Asian that we all find ourselves in, right? And that we all are like, I don't know, because if you're a 7th generation Japanese American, you're like, I'm so far removed from like Japan, and yet I still carry that with me. And here, all of us stand very Asian together, and this is a thing that we get to work towards. So I think it's fantastic what you're doing, and I'm so excited to support Very Asian Foundation and to help you make that 6-month goal turn into like a 3-week action plan, which is like whatever that looks like. Yeah, like I think you just so much acceleration. Like, let's make it happen.
I really appreciate it. I was going to ask you guys, so like, what do you think Very Asian should do? Like, what is the thing that you would like to see? Is it an actionable change item? Is it like, I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, I just spouted off a bunch of ideas, but is there something like that you think needs to happen?
I mean, I think from a broad perspective, especially what you talked about in terms of like supporting other organizations, but I think redefining what it means to be just very Asian in general and providing us the space. I think that's like, not very Asian, not the foundation has to be the one that redefines it, but like is continuing to help push for that. Like you said, you've already having conversations about, hey, a scholarship for adoptees who are wanting to go on not even maybe a reunion search, but just like a home tour,
cultural
essentially
search.
go home. Yeah, like a cultural journey. And I think just even like those little things are so important, because I think especially over the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of organizations come up and raise a lot of money to do a lot of things for different places. And I think there's always going to be the gaps where we miss, I think what I love about Very Asian, like what KJ said, is like it helps us to really reconcile with that and find ourselves where those gaps are and fill that. And so I guess for me, very broadly speaking, that was not really an actionable item at all, but that's what I think of when I think about just being very Asian. The hashtag, the movement, the foundation itself is like helping to fill those gaps.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely idea too, because it helps adoptees reconcile with our identity outside of the system, And what I heard from your story is you had kind of the opportunity where you didn't follow the proper channels. You just showed up and you were like, hey, I know I was adopted to this agency, but I'm going to go on your tour and I'm going to show up at my agency and be like, hey, is there a way that I can, like, we have a proper procedure? And you're like, well, F that procedure.
I'm already here though.
Yeah. Like, just like
all those things. I'm not coming back to this place.
Yeah. Do you know how expensive it is? Yeah. But I mean, realistically, like, yeah, just ways that we can examine what it means to be Asian, American, human, all those things. In a way, like for me, it's been a real privilege to have a friendship with one of my friends in Springfield who works in government, and she is Japanese American and also a woman. So she obviously has to deal with a lot more crap than I ever did. But dealing with like that, learning about her approach to being Japanese American has helped me celebrate what it means to be Japanese American, what it means for her, and like, obviously that's not a thing but in the same way that you said, I don't really celebrate Lunar New Year, even though like Koreans historically do, but I do it with my friends. I think is having like amplifying voices of all of our intersectional, like, part of the Pan-Asian identity, right? Whether that's West Asia, South Asia, East Asia, like all those, and finding all those things and bringing lots of people together. So it's not just Koreans talking about what it means to be Korean American for Koreans, but it's like actually how we can bring lots of people and give people a platform so that we begin to build intersectional identities, and we can then collectively join into all of our celebrations and realize that, like, even if you don't celebrate Lunar New Year, like you can still, how to do these things and can still help introduce people to it and still help people fall in love with this part of our culture and this part of what it means to be American, by amplifying other voices. And I think that it's just like simple, quote unquote, simple content generation and like an amplification of voices is like a great first step. Is like, let's just build in what it means to be like, if we're going to be very Asian, then let's get all of them and let's celebrate all of it.
Yeah.
Because when we started, it was just for the Korean adoptees, and we were trying to amplify Korean adoptee voices and our voices in general, just the three of us. So like KJ said, very Asian could be a lot more voices, not just the Korean adoptee community. It could be a lot of them, and maybe that's starting a podcast or YouTube channel or some other things like that. I mean, I know a great producer. Named Jerry, but but other than that, honestly, the voices, he pops in just for that. Thumbs up, probably.
You talking about me?
Yeah, but no, I mean that's why we started this. I mean, it was just really for us, but same thing. It's branched off into hearing so many stories and meeting so many amazing people like yourself, and so that's something that we are very fortunate to have come across. So.
Oh my gosh. Okay, you guys have like lifted me up today, so now I'm gonna go out and do something on my list.
Oh yeah.
Every day I look at my list and I'm like, oh my god.
How about a very Asian cookbook?
That'd be amazing.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
Nathan
I will help.
Food.
Nathan's like, as long as I can be featured.
Yeah.
Well, Michelle, we really appreciate you giving us this time. The viewer at home, because there are no viewers, they're just listeners, can't tell, but it's gotten progressively darker in the room that Michelle's in. So that means that she's given us quite a bit of her time out of her really extremely busy schedule.
Yeah, anyone who comes in with the title parent, I'm just like, thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah,
regardless of what else you do, thank you.
And so before we transition to our food section, Michelle, where can people find you and how can they get in touch with the foundation?
Ooh, okay, so right now we are just basically Google the Very Asian Foundation. Very Asian Foundation, did I say that right? Right now we are also very-asian.com. However, that was just for like a pop-up. We need to change to a .org, so we'll probably just reroute and redirect things, but eventually we'll probably be like veryasian.org if I had to guess, or veryasianfoundation.org.
Gotcha.
But right now we're very-asian.com. Oh, whatever. Anyway,
find it on the Googles.
Yes.
on the Googles, okay.
Hashtag it.
Wherever we are, it's just like find us on social media, and then it'll lead you to our website.
Perfect.
Yeah, and we're on. My son goes, "Mom, can you hear me? I can hear you." He's screaming, "Mom, can you hear me?" Yeah. He's so funny. So yeah, I'm just everywhere on the internet, basically. Supposedly I'm on TikTok, but I haven't really posted anything. So I need to get in TikTok. I need to let the kids do that.
We also should probably figure that out, but
Nah.
That's where everybody is, but it's just so much work.
Yeah, you might have to start dancing or something. I don't know.
You don't have to dance.
I have literally tried to make so many videos, like, I'll like lip sync something. I'm like, I look like an asshole.
Internet, I am a mother. I do not have time for this.
I just look super thirsty on it. So I'm like, no, I can't do it. It's just weird.
Well, you're already doing a lot of incredible things, so I think that is perfectly okay.
Yeah.
But Michelle, again, it's been an absolute honor and pleasure and privilege to have you here with us on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for sharing about all the incredible work that you're doing. We're going to take a very short break, and then we'll be right back with food talk or food eat. I don't really know what's happening, but we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Janchi Show. We are here with our food talk. That's what we're going to call this section now, because we don't have a food to eat, but we're going to talk about a food. And we just had a great interview with Michelle Lee. Thank you so much again for that. Since we don't have a food to eat, I was thinking it would be fun. We could talk about foods that we ate, either that we enjoy, an Asian dish or something from a restaurant, or something that we grew up with. I mean, we just passed Lunar New Year, so some of us made some food, some of us maybe discovered a new food. I don't know. It's anything that we can just talk about something that has to do with that. So, Michelle, feel free, because you were just kind of briefly telling us about something that sounds very interesting that I've definitely never heard of.
Okay, so you've never heard of a St. Paul sandwich?
St. Paul,
No.
Okay.
No.
So I didn't realize this. This is a St. Louis thing, but a lot of St. Louisans don't know about it, actually.
Huh.
I mean, some do, but like my family, they were like, what is that? So it's basically, the rumor was back in the day, which I don't know when the day was, but
The day.
the
We all remember
day.
the day.
The day.
The day.
quote.
Yep, the day that we all remember.
The rumor has it that there was a Chinese restaurant owner who said, how do I get more people to buy my food? Well, it looks like a lot of these people like sandwiches. So what I'm going to do is make a Chinese dish that's a sandwich. So they took an egg foo young patty. Yeah. And they take egg foo young and they fry it up. They put it on white bread. It's got to be white bread with mayonnaise
Right.
and pickles. And it is, I'm not kidding, the
Wow.
most delicious thing ever. First of all, it's like banh mi in the sense that it's like less than $3. You can go and get it. Yeah. It's greasy. It's crunchy. You can put, usually I think the big one is shrimp, but a lot of people do pork or chicken or whatever. It's salty. It's just so good. And you have to eat it fairly fast because the bread kind of just melts away on it.
Right.
And it's like the cheapest white bread that you can get that makes it so good. It's
Wonder
like,
bread.
it's so good.
Amazing.
And I don't know if that's really that's the legend, that it was like, well, we got to start selling to people who eat sandwiches, and that's what St. Louisans like. But that's the story that stuck around, and it's really popular in. I would probably say it's more like Asian and Black communities in St. Louis
Okay.
that dig the St. Paul.
Can you give me
sandwich.
like some neighborhoods in St. Louis where I could potentially go find it? Because the next
Oh,
time
I
I'm
mean,
up there, I'm
everywhere.
like,
Well,
Yeah,
you can
sure
go
gonna
anywhere,
find it.
anywhere.
Anywhere.
Because I've
St.
looked around
Paul
and it's
sandwich.
like, the St. Paul sandwich.
I think
Literally, if you're paying more than $5, you're getting ripped off. It's got to be like $3.99.
funny.
Yeah.
All right.
Interesting. I
I
wonder where
gotta
that
try
name
that out.
came from. Because I was thinking, it was like, when you said St. Paul, I was thinking like Minneapolis.
Yeah, I know.
I mean,
me
there's
too.
like a St. Charles up on
Yeah.
like the north side, but yeah, I don't
Mhm.
know where St. Paul came from, but
Hmm.
whatever.
Yeah, I
that
don't
sounds
either.
dope.
That
That sounds
sounds
so.
really
Is there like a
good.
It is
traditional
really
like?
good.
Does it just like come with a side of fries or like, or just, like whatever?
No, it's just, I mean, you just get the sandwich. So it's like,
Alright.
you could get maybe fried rice or something with it. But and I always kind of feel like it's like the dirtier the place looks, the better it is.
Yeah, all
I
right.
mean,
Mom
not
and
like,
pop
to that.
shop. Yeah.
That's like a Midwest thing, I feel like.
Mhm.
yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
a Midwest
also,
thing?
also, like if you're getting a sandwich like that, like you should immediately feel it in your heart. Otherwise, you're doing it wrong. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, my heart.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing.
That's awesome. What about you guys? Do you think of anything that you had as from your hometowns or growing up?
Not growing up, I didn't really have access to a whole lot of ethnically different food.
You didn't have like
But
cashew chicken.
I know we had we had a Chinese restaurant come in at some point, and it was more. I felt like it was more Panda Express like than actually like traditional, like actual or Chinese food. But there's a new restaurant, a Thai restaurant that opened up here in Indianapolis that my wife and I went to. It's really good. It's called the Bodhi. It's run by 3 generations of Thai women, and they have a lot of different dishes that are great. But the thing that really stuck out to me was the spring rolls, because the grandmother wakes up every morning and goes in there and hand rolls all the spring rolls. So if you want them, you got to get there and get them early, and they are probably the best roll of the best spring roll I probably ever had. So it's like really fresh in my mind because now I want that, but we're in a blizzard, so I can't go get it. And now I'm sad.
Okay. Nathan, what about you?
Well, we already talked about Brahms, so I'll spare that story again. But
Nathan's favorite ethnic food is Brahms.
Well,
Amazing.
So one thing that I remember when, because the whole coming out of the fog, when we start, exploring more Asian food or Asian culture, things like that. One of the things when I was in LA is really kind of when it started for me, because being in Los Angeles, I had a lot more access to diverse food cuisines and things like that. So I don't remember exactly what year. I want to say it was like around 2009, 2010 or so. Was this huge rush of food trucks, and I love fusion. That's something I feel because I am a fusion in a way of being American and Korean and an adoptee. I'm a fusion, so fusion food has always spoken to me. And so when Roy Choi came out with the Kogi taco truck, that was amazing to me. Having like Korean beef wrapped up in like a taco was just, I don't know. That's kind of like, maybe that's the same concept. Putting something amazing, an Asian food, into like a sandwich or a handheld item like that is the key, because
That's why I was like, you know what white people like these days? Tacos.
sandwiches
Try to
and
get them to eat
tacos.
more of my food. Put it in a taco.
Yeah, either that or put it on a stick, because and that's another thing, is the Koreans had it right when they put hash browns on a corn dog or a cheese stick. So that's pretty amazing
gosh,
also.
yeah.
So I
Very
have to
true.
say that that Kogi truck really did it for me, and it really kind of branched me off into trying more foods like that, and more
From
Korean food in
Brahms to
general.
Kogi.
Yeah.
Brahms to Kogi.
Amazing. Yeah, what's wild is like, so we recently moved back to Dallas from Springfield, and whenever Sarah and I reminisce about Springfield, we actually more often than not are thinking about Asian food places. And like, obviously Sue's was great. There's Korean food here, so like it's not that's fine. But there's a place called Scully's where you could get like a good ramen, or like a what they call like a wok bowl kind of thing. That was really good. There's a place called Craft Sushi where you could do, it's like a Chipotle but for poke bowls.
Yeah.
And that one was kind of new, and I'm like, oh man, that's great, because we eat Chipotle all the time. But if we want the same thing that's not Chipotle, we can get it Asian flavored. That's a Korean American owner. There's like Korean fried chicken, which I still want to try. There was Korea, literally just called Korea but spelled phonetically, where you can get like bibimbap, and that was always amazing. Like, there's just like so many good Asian places in Springfield. I'm like, man, why? I don't know. I don't know. Like, there's just like a level of like comfort food. Obviously, it is comfort food. Whenever I have like traditional Korean food or some of those places, and it's like, man, this just like feels good in my heart and in my stomach. And I'm usually eating with close friends, like either like this is a favorite place to go, or I get to introduce someone to this food. And I'm like, yeah, you need to stop eating from Mexican Villa, or you need to stop eating at whatever. And like, here's some
Mexican
other
Villa?
things.
You're gonna diss Mexican Villa?
I've never been. I've only heard stories, but I stand by my dissing of Mexican Villa. Someone
Oh,
come at me.
dang.
So anyways, yeah. But it was just like, yeah, so it's always just a privilege to eat there and to introduce friends to it and be like, oh man, I love this food, and be like, hooray, we've converted another white person, whatever. But yeah, so like those are the places that really stand out to me, and foods that I love. Although I will just say japchae is probably my favorite traditional Korean food, and I got to have that for this solal, and that was amazing. So
Nice.
yeah.
Very nice. Well,
Very nice.
again, Michelle, thank you so much for
Yes, thank you
coming
so,
on
so
the
much.
show, the podcast, just for your time and your story, and just
Doing the work.
Yeah.
Doing the
incredible.
work. I sorry I
Work.
didn't get the cue to say that, doing the work at the same time as you guys. Yeah, but thank you so much. We're going to link the socials for both you and the foundation in the show notes. And in the meantime, y'all know where you can find us, at Janchi Show on all the social media platforms. You can go to janchishow.com/support to figure out ways to support us. I guess you'll find out ways, not figure them out for yourself. You can also leave us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, preferably Apple Podcasts right now, because Spotify, we're just going to push it over here to the side for a moment. And if you are feeling up to it and you have a question or something that you'd like us to talk about on the show, you can reach out and leave us a voicemail. That number is 972-677-8867. You can also send us an email to janchishow@justlikemedia.com. I have been Patrick, at Patrick in the World on Instagram. That's Nathan, at @NNowak, and that's KJ, at KJ Relke, wherever he wants to be found. And that is it for our show this week. So until next Wednesday, Janchi, heyo.